Welcome to episode number 265 of the Beyond Social Media Show, the podcast for all of you marketing, advertising, public relations, and communications professionals. We are recording live on YouTube on April 18, 2019. You can find us, all of our channels, by searching for us. Search Beyond Social Media Show. You'll find us. This week, a bunch of topics to talk about as usual, including Google Currents, social media's demise, mean tweets, Google Classroom, podcast pages, podcast transcripts, battling earbuds, Spotify gets Grabby, TheSkimm sign up, Netflix magazine, Immersive Van Gogh, and a lot more. BL kicks it off with the best story of the week as usual. BL, what was that?
Well, you know, I'm a big Google Plus aficionado, and Google Plus is sort of back. They're calling it now, this is from Product Hunt Daily, and they shut down the network earlier this month, but then they decided to let it live on as Google Currents. And they think it's going to compete with Facebook, which certainly does need some competition. And it's going to focus on enterprise. It's kind of competing with Workplace and Microsoft's Yammer, and I don't know, maybe with Slack. I don't know what they're really thinking. You never know what Google's really thinking. But for the most part, it looks just like Google Plus. And now it's Google's second big enterprise communications tool. It also has Google Hangout, and the Hangout now has chat that Google thinks is going to be a Slack competitor. This all remains to be seen, and I think that they've been making a big effort to go toward an enterprise situation with all of this, and maybe they'll do it right this time. Who knows? But, I mean, I'm glad it's not completely gone, because for me, it was an incredibly useful tool.
Well, I've heard a lot of commiserating over the demise of Google.
You hated it.
From those who used it intensively, and I didn't use it a great deal, but a lot of people did, and there were great communities in there for those that did. And I mean, okay, so Google's going to keep Google Plus, rename it Google Currents, and pitch it to the enterprise. So if I'm a buyer at a large company and I'm considering some type of social network that I want for my internal employees, why would I ever choose Google, who shuts things down after everybody starts using them? Why would I do that?
It's a good question.
It's a really bad sales pitch.
It's a good question, but on the other hand, there are good features, and for however long it's around, it's going to have some excellent points for using it. And, you know, maybe this is the time Google gets it right.
Yeah, maybe.
One thing you got to say about them, they don't stop innovating.
Well, that's true, but they actually do stop innovating. They start innovating, and then they stop innovating and leave everybody else in the lurch.
I have some alternatives to Inbox, which is the other thing they recently got rid of that everybody loves. Anyway.
You know, to do is go through the archives and put together a post of the dearly departed products that we've talked about in the past. There's a long list, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my
Google
thing
would lead the list, that's for sure.
That froze up a little bit there. My best story is well, it's a bunch of best stories. So I've all been on about audio recently. There's no change this week. The first one is James Cridland of Podnews reports that Apple Podcasts are now available on the web. So typically when you search for a podcast and got the Apple page, it was an iTunes page, right? But now Apple has rolled out actual web-based pages that are mobile responsive. They work on desktop and Android phones, and they've been indexed by Google search already. So there are show pages, and there are individual pages for each episode. So ours, I went and looked and found ours. and took a look at them. So on the show page, it shows the title of the podcast, the full show description that we put in our feed, the podcast category that's listed in Apple Podcasts, the star rating for people who have reviewed the podcast, the number of episodes, except ours is listed as 100, and I'm sure that we have many more than 100 in iTunes. So
especially since this is 265.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's maybe just they're putting a limit on 100 for some reason for the web. I don't know. There's a link to listen in iTunes. It shows by default 6 episodes that you can play on the show page. And then there's a more episodes link that you can load more. It has a play and a pause button. It has a length notation, how long the podcast lasts. Titles, link to the individual episode pages. There's listener reviews, category podcasts, and then listeners also subscribe to podcasts. So similar podcasts listed at the bottom, but there is no link to our podcast website.
Really?
Yeah, which I found odd. On the episode pages, though, there's you can play the episode on the page. Simple play button, no controls. You can listen to it in iTunes if you want to. It does have the length notation, show title, description. It uses the show logo icon for each individual episode rather than the episode specific image.
The thumbnails?
Yeah. It doesn't use the thumbnails, which I thought was weird. And then it links to the episode posts. So while the show page doesn't link to our website, each individual page for each individual episode links to the episode post on our site.
Well, that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. And it is a follow link. So those of us in SEO know that we want follow rather than no follow links. So that's a good thing. So it's interesting that is showing up in Google. At the same time, Podnews also reports that Google is prepping a web version of Google Podcasts. So they're a bit behind. If Apple has already rolled out their version, there's got to be some competition going on. So they need to get moving. But they did last week. Android Police, Jules Wang and Scott Scrivens reported that Google Podcasts is now automatically generating the transcripts for each episode to help listeners search for shows. So they're using that as metadata to make it more. They make the content of each episode more searchable. Not every show apparently has the transcript, but that is showing up now. So I would expect that Google's web version of podcasts rolls out sometime soon, given that Apple's is already out there, and hopefully built into their web pages would be, with those transcripts, the ability to start a podcast directly at the point that you've searched for something. So if we were like last episode, I don't know, pick a top, robots. We talk about robots all the time, right? So if somebody searched for Boston Dynamics and wanted to know about a specific robot, maybe our episode would show up in Google search.
That would depend on what they used for the transcription and whether it had timestamping in it. Some of them do.
I presume that they do. I would think Google's smart enough to know to put timestamping in, because that's exactly what would deliver Google's all about delivering exactly what you asked for in the search results, right? So I would think that is Google's secret sauce to winning the web war on for internet or for audio search. So I found those two things particularly interesting. What do you think?
Well, I think that this is proof that podcasts are here to stay, that podcasts are being taken seriously, and that the competition is certainly heating up. And it's one of those things where I'm glad we got in there early.
Right. Well, we have a whole library of 265 episodes of audio content now that will soon be found, hopefully, when Google rolls out the surfacing audio in search, which opens up for podcasters or anybody creating audio. It's not just podcasts. Opens up a huge new audience to their content. So well,
I also read this week that Apple is going to separate iTunes, podcast, TV, and iMusic. So they're going to split it into several different entities. So I don't know how that's going to impact on this and whether it's going to just confuse people, but I think iTunes is ultimately going away. Oh, are you frozen?
Not anymore. So they're so they're making it maybe it has something to do with the Apple TV putting things into different channels.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, but obviously, podcasts are an important part of whatever it is they're all doing.
Right. Yep. Yep. Audio's the next frontier, as I've been saying. So, so what do you got? What's next, BL?
Well, something I want to talk about with you, and that is this week, how this started was that my friend Toby Bloomberg had a post about how happy she was about all the blog friends that she'd made in the early days, and then I got in on that, and you know, everybody that we were all talking to each other, and we ended up saying, you know, we should have meetups and all of this. And along comes Paul Cheney, and he posts this article, "Is social media over?" And it's from a site called My Customer, and the person who wrote it is Neil Davey. And so hat tip to Paul Cheney for starting this conversation. But what happened here was that last week, British cosmetics company, I think that's what they are anyway, they're called Lush, and they announced that they're going to close all their UK social media accounts in protest at having to pay to appear in news feeds and battle against algorithms. So, you know, the question is this Chicken Little, or is this the beginning of the end for social media? And, you know, frankly, it's one brand, and I don't think this is a trend, and I don't see why brands shouldn't pay to participate in social media. But there are many differing points of view on this, and I wonder what yours is, Dave.
Well, a lot. So first of all, when I read that, I'm going one first. I don't know who Lush is. I don't know if they're a big brand or not.
They make smelly cosmetics.
Okay. They're not. I did not know of the brand until I read this article. So there's that. I mean, it is fine and well for a big brand like Coca-Cola, who has tons of money and they can spend it on TV advertising or whatever. They have other avenues on which to raise awareness of their brand and keep awareness of their brand and get people to them because they're a big brand and they can do that. So they could take a stand like this and it wouldn't really affect them all that much, right? But the small guys, no way. This is the most cost-effective way of reaching an audience.
Not only that, but they're going to tune out of interaction with customers. And, you know, this has become the fastest and best way for brands to interact with people, put out fires, solve problems, respond to people, you know, and so, yes, there are the haters, there are, you know, there's the politics, there's the trolls, of course there are. But I mean, what I think that brands like this need to do is learn how to use social media, learn how to identify the bots and block them, you know, teach their people how to be using the media responsibly. And I don't think that's happening.
Well, I mean, also, if you do any kind of customer service, you can't not be on social media.
Absolutely.
It's just not realistic at all, because that's the first place that people are going to go to contact you. And if you're not there, then you're not hearing your customers. You're not dealing with on the operational side, you're not learning about problems with your business from your customers because you're not listening, because you're not there.
Right, because you go dark doesn't mean your customers aren't still there. You know, it's kind of crazy.
And two, you're kind of insulting your customers by not addressing their problems, their issues, right? The other thing is the way that, so they said they're going to stop doing it because they're sick of paying to reach customers and fighting algorithms. Two things on that. It's like, what you're complaining about having to spend advertising because you're a business and that's what businesses typically do to find an audience. So that's stupid.
It's a really stupid reason. And you know, whoever said that, I mean, my sense of this brand is that they just don't really understand what social media is and how to use it. And, you know, are there haters? Yes, there are. And there are ways to deal with them. And there are ways to put out fires. And it takes skill. And, you know, if you've got it, it will work out better for you. I mean, I have a story later about something Sprite is doing that, is a real clear indicator of that.
But if they did this to take a stand, which brands do, they put a stake in the ground, they take a moral stand on something. That's a perfectly acceptable, perfectly legitimate thing to do, to define your culture as a company, but also as a publicity stunt, right? As long as it's truly felt and it is a stand you're taking to heart. If they were going to do that, then they should have said, social media is screwing us up. We don't, it's, as a society, it's screwing us up. It's messing with our elections. We're paying too much attention to it. We're not, they could have taken a moral stand and put a stake in the ground, and it would have been much more legitimate than what kind of sounds like whining. The other thing is,
it does sound like whining.
Algorithms. They're sick of battling algorithms. Well, okay, so are we all. But
right, exactly, and that's what we do.
We live in, it's an algorithmic world, and we're just living in it. You're still going to be maybe you're not going to be battling algorithms anymore, but they're still going to affect you regardless of whether.
It's a wimpy stand for this brand to take. I mean, they're not the only ones. Other brands have given up, but
Well, the other thing, the other reaction that I had after reading this was, well, tell me when P&G stops advertising on social media. And then I read an article, a Bloomberg article. Garrett DeVink and Sarah Fryer report that Procter Gamble is kind of throwing shade at social media. So there's P&G's chief brand officer, Mark Pritchard, blasted the digital media industry for lack of transparency, fraud, privacy breaches, and proliferation of violent and harmful content. All of those are completely legitimate reasons to blast social media for. He said that they would move their money to services that can guarantee the effectiveness, are completely free of offensive content, and more willing to share customer data with advertising. So there's two things there. Good luck with that. I mean, completely free of offensive content. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Not if there are people there.
Yeah, and the last part of it is more willing to share customer data with advertising. That's part of the problem that people have with social media.
Exactly.
Right? So you kind of anyway. He says he's been quoted as saying we've been tolerant for too long. It's not acceptable to have brands showing up where opioids are being offered, or illegal drugs are promoted, where abhorrent behavior is present, or where violence is seen. The apologies are heartfelt and appreciated, but that's not good enough. And he asked other advertisers to join him. So that's the rub. If there's a massive advertising boycott by the Procter & Gambles of the world, if they actually band together, they could change it.
Well, I mean, in Europe, that is changing, and they are making rules for forcing big tech to cut down on all of the issues that you're describing here. So, is there a need for regulation? There might be, but, it seems to me that this has gotten so big and so out of hand that there needs to be, I think, before the government steps in, I think the big technology companies need to sit down together and they need to figure it out. If they wanted to stop all the hate and all the trolls, they could. They have the technology to share our information. They have the technology to do what they want with the data. And I think it is high time that there is some regulation, but I think it better come from the players, not from the government, because then we're in for deep shit.
No, I agree. I don't think I think government pressure can help it along. But again, so two things.
Depends from where in the government it comes from,
As a marketer, if I've got a small client, a small budget client, I'd kind of be negligent not to recommend doing social media advertising.
Absolutely.
It is the most effective, cost-effective way of them reaching their business goals and reaching their audience they want to. But again,
well, I don't know why, but we're freezing up today.
Stand together and say, we're just going to pull it out until you figure this out. That would fix it.
Well, and probably very quickly too,
Yes,
but I mean, it's not one company, and it's not, whining is right. What you called it is whining. And, there does need to be a change. I think we can agree on that. There clearly needs to be a change.
Yeah. Yeah. So on to the next topic.
Well, I have a story about how, change might happen. This is from Ad Age Creativity, and it's a story by Anne Christine Diaz, and it's about Sprite. And Sprite developed an AI tool that could analyze the themes and the subjects of Twitter conversations to tell which were aggressive and which were non-aggressive messages. And then they used that data mining to find out who the aggressors were in the Sprite community, and they were able to identify this one guy who was like the most aggressive of everybody. He had attacked 565 people with more than 1,000 tweets in the past year. So they invited him to participate in what they called an experiment. They didn't reveal the subject. And when he got there, there were 100 of his targets, and they were each wearing a T-shirt that had one of his tweets printed on it. And they individually walked up in front of him and recited the tweet out loud to his face. And only after that, and they read things like nauseating rats, scum of life, the worst fear of pregnancy is ending up a fat and ugly slob like you. It took him a while to realize that these were his own words. And then all 100 of the people surrounded him. And then one person started singing the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love. And everybody started singing. And then what happened was amazing. One by one, people stepped up to this guy and they embraced him. And, he ended up smiling, and everybody's hugging and smiling. And there was a behind the scenes video, which we'll post. And the victims say that they felt great relief and pride that they participated in this experience, because as you can imagine, that would be hard to do. And he said, the bully said, when they all hugged me, I thought, I'm never going to forget this. And, that's what brands should be doing. And Sprite is just one of many and they have a campaign that is trying to neutralize hate with love. And back in January, they had a bunch of real people. They weren't actors, and they were athletes and artists who'd been bullied. And they were seen being told hurtful, abusive comments on social media based on real messages that they'd received. And in each case, their response was, I love you. And so Kareem Hoodoo of Anonymous Content was the director of the spot. And it's running with a wider campaign that has a lot of Instagram stories and a long form documentary and a bunch of GIFs that can be used to try to neutralize the hate. And Sprite is just one brand that's addressing online haters. Adidas has done it, Under Armour, Vivo in Britain. And so, there are ways to fight back without going, I'm taking my marbles and going home. So the strategy, but I don't know how this escaped my purview, but 2 years ago, there was a site called Trump with Love, and it transformed things that he said into videos that said positive things. I don't know how I missed that, but anyway, this is not a new thing. It's just something that I think should grow as a trend. And, that is how love always trumps hate.
Wow, that's very very clever, and yeah, I mean, what it reminds me of Sarah Silverman. We talked about this many episodes ago, where she said "I see you" to an online troll who was harassing her online. She basically said, I see you, I see who you are, I see I see the pain you're in, and basically started a conversation and turned the troll into a nice person. So
that's what happened here. I mean, it's so
unconventional approaches to dealing with.
But I just tell you a really quick story. A friend of mine is a shrink, and she was on the subway one day. She sits down, and this woman starts cursing at her, and she turned around and she said to the woman, "Oh, you must be very unhappy." And the woman said, I am. Started telling her all about her life. I mean, sometimes that's the way to handle it, is to just go, okay, I see your pain.
Yeah. So another audio story. They just keep coming. I'm telling you.
You're right, Dave. You're so right.
So Amazon Well, first of all, last episode, whether we went through the Apple announcements of all the new things, one of which is the AirPods 2 earbuds, which are going to be enabled with Siri now. So you don't have to fumble on your phone to activate Siri. With the AirPods, you can just activate it through your voice. So fantastic. A lot more people are going to be using Siri a lot more frequently with that kind of hands-free technology. But Amazon made a move, and they announced that they are going to be, I don't know if they announced or if Bloomberg has discovered, but it's a report by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman that Amazon is going to be making a rival to the AirPods and earbud to challenge Apple's supremacy in the category, and it will be enabled with Echo technology. So one thing, Amazon is likely to undercut price, right? So Apple's AirPods are $159, I think started at $159. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a $49 price point from Amazon for their earbuds.
Yeah, and then you can have Amazon employees spy on what music you're playing.
BL, you're going to have to get over it.
I'm not going to get over it. I do not want that thing in my house.
It doesn't matter if they're going to be in your house. It's going to be everywhere.
Well, I won't invite it. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So yeah, they're going to undercut it in price. And when I have a Mac, I have an iPhone, but when I need something, a peripheral for one of those things, I do not buy Apple because everything costs way too much. I go to Amazon and buy the knockoff, which is just as good, if not better, and costs a lot less, right? So I can see that happening with the.
You're not alone in that either. Everybody else is doing that too.
Yeah. But think about, okay, so how is Amazon going to be able to compete against Apple in this category? I do think so. I think they're undercut in price. They have Echo's installed base already, so they're already the biggest smart speaker. They have the most share for smart speakers, and those people, unlike BL, are very loyal to their smart speakers, so they love their Echoes. So it's an easy sell for them to take the Echo with them on the go, right? The Echo habit. I've told the story about getting off work, walking down the street to my bus stop, and thinking about playing football on the weekend, and almost blurting out to the air in public, Echo, what's the forecast for this weekend? That's the habit that you generate from having these smart speakers.
But why did they have to take Echo with them? Won't these earphones work on Android? I mean, wouldn't it be smart to make these for Android?
Well, I'm sure they will. I mean, that's the other thing, is they need to be work universally. But I've got the Amazon app on my iPhone, so it should be able to work with that, right? So it should work on any device. They've got the Echo skills, so I'm sure people will be building voice-activated skills for it. And then they've got content. They've got the Amazon Music, and they've got Audible. So there's already a built-in base of content that people like and listen to already. So I think they're well-positioned to take on Apple and the AirPods. Plus, most importantly, it frees up a ton of time for people to listen to our podcast.
That's right. And that is important. Yes. So Google has done something else that I think is way cool. Google is opening up a center in New York, a training center at its headquarters in Chelsea. And it's called Grow with Google New York. And it's open to all New Yorkers. They're going to have workshops. There's going to be one-to-one coaching. There's community events. There's one taking place today. At the moment, all the classes are full, but they keep on adding sessions. And right now on the site, it says new sessions will be added on Monday. So sessions are available to answer questions and give you guidance on Google Ads, on Google Analytics, on G Suite, on Gmail and Google Calendar. And there's career guidance. There's all sorts of, every day there's like a dozen different subjects that they're doing. And I take lots of Google classes and certifications online. And so I'm looking forward to actually doing this with their help. I think this will be really interesting.
I think it's kind of useless.
Why?
It's only New York.
Well, maybe they'll come to your city.
Maybe.
I think it's one of many. I mean, I'm just excited because I'm here and it's coming.
There you go.
Useless. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and more audio, of course. This is from Marketing Land's Chris Sherman. Spotify is acquiring more podcasts. So they acquired Parcast, which is a storytelling podcast studio. They produce storytelling driven podcasts. 18 high quality scripted series, including serial killer, unsolved murder. So it's true crime, it looks like. But they're just gobbling up content. So Spotify is really positioning themselves as not just the music streaming service, but competing heavily in the podcast category as well.
You know, an interesting thing about podcasts, the Trader Joe's podcast, which just dropped, I think, episode 6, is one of the top 10 downloaded podcasts on iTunes.
That actually does not surprise me.
It's wonderful.
People who are Trader Joe's fans are rabid Trader Joe's fans.
Like
They've got
me.
A loyal fan base. Yeah, I've been there once. I'm like, okay.
Oh my God. I mean, I there's not one near me. I have to take the bus across town, and I was there the other day and dropped $160 and took a Via to get home. And had I gone anywhere else, I would have had to spend 200 and something. I mean, what they have is good, and it's better than anything else we can get here.
See?
Maybe you have better groceries in Minneapolis.
We do, definitely. What's a Via?
Via is a service like Uber, but Via is shared service. So along the way, they may pick up other people, but as it turned out, they didn't. And they don't bring you right to your door. They bring you right near your door. So like, they brought me one avenue away, which is not a big deal.
Yeah, good enough.
Yeah, for $6.
I mean, with all those groceries, though, it must have been tough, one avenue. I mean.
Well, no, I had a little cart.
So I finally signed up for the TheSkimm newsletter. I mean, I know people are rabid about it, and I haven't never subscribed, so I thought, well, maybe I should. So I did, and everybody should subscribe to it just for the experience of signing up for it, because they do a fantastic job of the sign up process. So you go to the page, you enter your email, it's a typical newsletter, you sign up, brings you to the confirmation page, and the confirmation page is the design of the site is very elegant and everything, so it's a pleasant experience that way. But then you go to the confirmation page, and the confirmation page includes "How did you hear about us?" a form asking, which I've never seen before. That's a very smart idea. A form asking, "How did you hear about us?" So you can easily tell them, and then you get your welcome email. And the welcome emails typically are, you've seen one, you've seen them all. They all have the same template, and nobody thinks about optimizing your welcome email after you sign up for a newsletter for the experience. TheSkimm does. So their subject line in the welcome email is, "Pleased to meet you. We're so excited you're here. This is what's coming next." Of course, you're going to open it up. People open up welcome emails because they're just habitually inclined to do so. But this put some emotion, put some personality in the subject line to get you to open it up. You open it up. It's a clean design, of course. They use animated GIFs. It says, "We'll see you in your inbox tomorrow morning," or if it's the weekend, on Monday morning. "If you can't wait that long, here's the latest issue." Again, that's a great thing. I don't know why more people don't do this, but link to your last issue for your welcome email so people can start consuming your content right away. They're excited. They've subscribed to you for a reason, so they like your content. They probably want more of it. So getting them to consume more of it, or giving them more of it, is a nice thing to do. Plus, it builds interaction with your newsletter, which sends signals to the Google, the Gmails of the world that you should not send this to the spam filter. And then it asks you to download the TheSkimm app and share TheSkimm. So it's just a really good, really well thought out sign up process that should be a case study somewhere. Maybe
I like it. So I'm on to bad news. How about you?
I got a couple more good ones.
Okay.
Netflix This is from all about Bloomberg this week, apparently. Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw reports that Netflix has plans to publish a journal with a working title Wide to promote its programs and stars ahead of this year's Emmys. So the streaming service is going to go to print to publicize their content. It's a 100 plus page inaugural issue. It'll include interviews and essays and features about the people who work on Netflix services. It'll be free. It'll highlight particular shows and talent within the Hollywood community. And so they're going to distribute it in June in time for the Emmys. So it's good to basically to influence the influencers in Hollywood to boost their shows in anticipation of Emmy awards. They've asked collaborators to participate in photo shoots and interviews. So really smart play, I think, and kind of a print magazine from a print publication from Netflix. That's going to get people's attention.
Everything old is new again, and
Exactly.
maybe this explains why Netflix raised their prices.
Well, listen, it's not nearly as bad as YouTube raising the YouTube TV.
Ridiculous!
Oh my God!
$49.95 a month.
An extra what? 5 channels,
which nobody needs.
Oh my God!
There is I really believe there is a limit to how much we can consume, how much we can subscribe to.
No. Audio. We're getting more time back.
No, I'm sorry. There's a limit to how much we will pay for.
Exactly. There
you know, I mean, that's the bottom line. And of course, it can't all be free. And, but I think it's fun that there's going to be a magazine.
Yeah. Last good one. This is from Greg Clark via my friend Cynthia Korn, who shared it on Facebook, and it's a video. We'll put it in the show notes. It's Immersive Van Gogh. So there is a French gallery called Atelier Lumière, I think,
something like that.
And they have a Van Gogh exhibit that is ceiling to from floor to ceiling projections of Van Gogh's works that are moving, and it's just amazing. It combines art and music into this completely immersive experience of Van Gogh's art. The people are actually the people who are in the gallery and looking at this, experiencing this, become part of the exhibit itself. We'll put the video in the show notes. It's amazing. So, and I'm my favorite artist is Van Gogh, so I couldn't pass that up. So, on to work stuff, DL.
Well, I just want 2 things about that. One is that the Metropolitan Museum of Art just opened an exhibit of rock and roll memorabilia, basically, and Steve Miller and a bunch of old gray-haired rockers were there, and they have the guitars that they all use and the pianos, and it's music and art, and it's wonderful. And the Jewish Museum in New York is going to, their next exhibit is Leonard Cohen. The whole museum is going to be Leonard Cohen.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. So are we on to bad news? I have bad news.
We are. Yep.
Okay. Burger King, who has been known over the years to be tasteless, has done it again. And they had to apologize. They had an ad that showed in New Zealand, they showed people eating burgers with chopsticks, or trying to. And they had 2.7 million views, and it prompted an Asian comic whose name is Jenny Yang, to say, "What the hell is wrong with white people?" Last year, Dolce & Gabbana made a mistake like that, and that caused Chinese e-commerce sites to stop selling their products. This is potentially damaging to Burger King's big growth plans in Asia, especially in China, where it opened about 100 new restaurants last year, and they plan to open in 1,000 locations. So the video showed people trying to eat a Burger King Whopper with a pair of oversized chopsticks, and it was just really tasteless. So speaking of that, I also got a really stupid pitch this week from Burger King. And I think this is Burger King France. And it was one of the worst PR pitches I've ever seen, because I couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about. He was basically saying, I think, that there were going to be these glasses that you would get with your hamburger, and you could use the glass. If you got a certain kind of glass, you could get a free Whopper, or maybe had a. And I asked him 4 times, what does this mean? Does this mean that the person has to have several of them? And he kept sending me these really obtuse answers. So I would say that Burger King has some issues in their marketing.
Do you use chopsticks?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do I. They're absolutely fun. I mean, I can't eat Asian food without chopsticks because it's just too fun to eat.
Exactly. Well, I can't do it right now because I only have one hand. But
I mean, I don't know. I would like to try and eat a hamburger. Now that you mention it, I would like to try and eat a hamburger with chopsticks.
Yeah, with great big huge chopsticks.
So I guess
stupid.
I'm kind of at a loss of why that's offensive, though.
Well, you have to watch the video. They pulled it. They apologized. They said this was not like their brand. They didn't mean to have a racial slur. Blah 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 blah. You know, the same old stuff where you wish you were a fly on the wall when they were saying, "What a great idea! Let's do this." You know, and I mean, let's send out this stupid press release. Let's have this silly video. You know, you wonder like, what were they thinking?
Okay, well, on the plus side, Burger King apparently is going to introduce the Impossible Burger. They're going to start selling the Impossible Burger. So there's that.
What's that?
Impossible Burger is the best veggie. I am a carnivore, right?
Impossible Burger is
Impossible Burger.
Okay.
It's a veggie burger that is. I like I said, I'm an omnivore. I eat all kinds of meat, but this is a veggie burger that actually it bleeds. It uses in soybeans there is
it bleeds.
It bleeds. In soybeans there is an agent. That's
disgusting.
There's a let me finish, please. In soybeans, there is in the root of a soybean plant, there is a compound that is nearly identical to hemoglobin. And so what the people who created the Impossible Burger did was they realized this. They figured out how to recreate that chemically or whatever, and they use it. So what it does is it makes the veggie burger juicy like a hamburger is, and browns. It browns when you cook it. So it acts just like a hamburger. It's just not. It's plant-based. The entire thing is plant-based. And I've had them. They're great. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I've had veggie burgers before that are horrible, but and I kind of dismiss them because they're horrible. But this one is different. It's called the Impossible Burger for a reason. So Burger King is going to start selling them.
As a person who doesn't eat beef or chicken, the idea of my veggie burger bleeding is really gross.
See, that's what I told my girlfriend too, and she's a vegan, so I shouldn't have said that. Let's go try this Impossible Burger rather than talking about the hemoglobin, which is the part that I found fascinating.
Oh my God, I won't be eating any of those anytime soon. Okay,
so
I'm a Dr. Prager's veggie burger person.
So you like dry vegetables?
No, they're good.
Anyway, next. My worst one is, surprisingly enough, Marketing Over Coffee, the podcast. Now, I've talked about this podcast in the past, right? It's my favorite podcast. I listen to it.
What did they do wrong?
Every episode, I listen to it without fail. I always learn something from it. This is the podcast from Christopher Penn and John Wall. They're just very smart. There's always something I learn from them. But this past not the most recent, but two episodes ago, was their April Fool's edition. And they had, well, it wasn't them. It was Carrie and Katie, who I don't know who they are, but they took over the podcast and ran the podcast, presumably because neither Christopher Penn or John Wall could do the podcast that week. I believe both of them are podcasters themselves. They sounded perfectly natural for podcasters. They were knowledgeable and everything, but it wasn't Christopher Penn and John Wall.
That was the joke.
That's not a joke.
I
want my normal podcast. I don't want two people I don't know doing my podcast. So if we ever can't make a podcast, can't make an episode, at least one of us has to be here. If we're going to have a guest, that's fine. To replace one of us, we can't do it. That's fine. But we can't just give the podcast to two other people that none of our listeners know who they are. It's just the wrong thing to do.
I think it was a joke, Dave.
No, it's not funny. No, I don't like it. What was funny is my reaction to it is exactly what I just expressed.
Yeah,
like,
what the hell are you
doing? This is my podcast. Why are you doing this to me? It's because on podcasts you get to know the hosts.
You do, yeah.
And, so that's the big draw of it, is the personality of the host and everything. You get to know them, and like all of a sudden there are these imposters in my podcast. It's awful.
Dave, you're so funny. That brings us to shiny new objects, right?
Yes, it does, yes.
Okay, so Google, not only got rid of Google Reader and Google Plus and I don't know, I can't even think of all the things that they got rid of, but they have gotten rid of Google Inbox, which was pretty much the best thing that happened to Gmail in ever. And they've taken some of the features that it had into Gmail, but not really. So Wired had a list of 5 or 6 alternatives, and I'll post a link to that in the show notes. Why, Google?
I know. So this, mine I already cited, actually, Podnews. Podnews newsletter and podcast by James Cridland. It is a podcast and on-demand audio industry news that he curates. It's fantastic. It is daily. If you don't want to read the newsletter, listen to the podcast because it's the same information. It's just the audio format. I like both, but I like the newsletter because it has the links of everything he talks to. So if I want to follow up and read the stories individually, I can. But it's a great newsletter, so I recommend it to everybody who's interested in the podcast and audio industry.
This is exactly why we run show notes after our show that have links to everything that we talk about, so that if you want to know more about where the stories came from or where they lead, you just go to BeyondSocialMediaShow.com and you will find the show notes for this and every other of our 265 episodes. So we hope you'll do that. And if you want to find us, just look for BeyondSocialMediaShow.com. Okay, so we all love Lego on this podcast, and Lego has a new robot. We also love robots. Has a robot building kit for kids, and it's called Spike Prime, and it just came out, and it's supposed to help kids learn to make robots, and they look fabulous. The ones that they show in the promo look great. It makes me want to build robots.
Spike Prime is that like Artemis Prime? Is that like no?
I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about? Transformers?
Oh, maybe this is their version of it. Yeah. I mean, look at the...
I expect there should be a Lego's Transformers movie coming out in the not too distant future, right?
Could happen. So I think that that brings us. Where does that bring us, Dave? Do you have any shiny objects? Oh, you did. You just gave us one.
I did, yes. I got a couple of pat in the back things. I did a podcast interview with the 2-Minute Talk Tips podcast.
Love the title.
Bill Monroe. It is a podcast about public speaking. And he's great. He has a whole, if you want to learn about people who learn from people who have done public speaking, then I highly recommend the 2-Minute Talk Tips podcast. He has a whole bunch of them with a bunch of different people that have done it. I was interviewed for it, so we'll put a link to that in the show notes. We talked about how public speaking is an important skill for digital marketers or for marketers in general. So we'll put a link to that. And then EContent, Lynn Pofall wrote an article in EContent magazine about reimagining monetization in a post-advertising world. This is targeted towards publishers, right? So how do publishers survive in the ad block era? So some of the things that people talked about in the article are sponsored content, of course, affiliate links somebody mentioned. That's really only going to work with really if you've got a massive audience. Affiliate links is like Amazon links. So you link to a book in Amazon, somebody clicks on the link, buys the book, and you get a cut of the proceeds. Subscription revenue, a lot of people are going back to subscription revenue, but as we discussed, how many subscriptions can you have to stuff? My thoughts were, I see a lot of publications, or a lot, but I see publications moving towards hosting their own events and making revenue, having revenue out of actual physical events, conferences and stuff, podcasts, obviously, and online courses too. So increasingly, I'm seeing publications offering online courses. So there's some thoughts. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and I guess we're on to daily numbers.
Well, I have a pro tip, and it relates to something that you were talking about with TheSkimm, and that is that when I do contact forms for my clients, one of the things that I include in there is, where did you hear about us? Because that lets us know what part of our marketing is working. Yeah. And nobody does that in the contact form.
Yeah. Good pro tip. My pro tip is, don't replace your podcast host with somebody who's completely alien to your audience. Ever.
Okay. All
right. Now we're on to the daily.
You didn't
numbers.
Like that.
Not at all. It sucked. So the daily numbers this week, I've got a bunch of them, and it's because there's 2 surveys that came out regarding podcasting. One of which is a major annual survey that I look forward to every year, and another is a one-off. The first one is Edison Research. Edison has been doing research on audio since 2008. They have what's called the Share of Ear report. So it's not just podcasting, but it's audio as well. They did a national telephone survey of 1,500 people aged 12 and older, coupled with a national online survey of 4,126 people aged 12 and older. And then the University of Florida and Futuri Media did a survey on behalf of the National Association of Broadcasters of podcast users. There are 2,000 participants. The study focuses exclusively on those who listen to podcasts regularly, and profiles their demographics and so forth. So let me run through some of the findings here. This is from Edison Research. Sources used at least, I'm going to move this up to my big screen so I can actually read it. Sources used at least occasionally to discover podcasts. This is from Edison Research again. Searching the internet was the top way that people use to discover podcasts. So that's very important to know, because I haven't seen that before. But also, given what we just talked about in this podcast and how Apple is folding out some web-based pages for podcasts, and Google is transcribing podcasts, that's going to continue to be a primary way that people find podcasts. Social media posts is next. Recommendations from family and friends, recommendations from other audio program hosts, advertisements on other audio programs, recommendations from ads on AM/FM radio, iTunes Music Store, Google Play, recommendations found in publications, and recommendations by apps and personalization. So the next one is, this is from the University of Florida Futura Media survey, and this is podcast accessing platform. What platforms do which people listen to podcasts through? YouTube was the top one.
Surprise.
At 70%. So this is also something that was mentioned in the Edison research, is that people are listening to podcasts, listening to YouTube. So that is, we record directly to YouTube, so we have our podcast there. People can listen to it. So that's something to consider as a podcaster, because it is, again, second largest search engine behind Google. Spotify is next, and then iTunes, Apple Podcasts, which is surprising, given that Spotify, I mean, this is a recent survey, so maybe, I was kind of surprised to see that Spotify was next, but given their big investments, maybe it's paying off.
Well, they just bought a whole bunch of companies that are podcast related.
Yeah, well, Gimlet and
Yeah.
a bunch of others, yeah. After iTunes and Apple is Google Play Music, then Audible, Amazon, then
Uh-oh.
the personality of the host personality's website. TuneIn Radio is at the bottom. Again, this is from the University of Florida survey. At home is a huge opportunity to reach podcast listeners. So the listening location at the top is at home. Then next is in the car or truck, when walking around, doing exercise, while at work, or riding public transportation, in that order. That is backed up by Edison's research, which also finds that at home is the top listening location, followed by in a car or truck, followed by walking around, followed by working out, followed by at work, and then while riding public transportation. So those two are in sync. Last set of data is activities done while listening to podcasts. This is from Edison Research. Not doing anything else, just listening. The top of the list. So nobody,
Really?
no multitasking, just listening to the podcast. That's valuable information. That tells you that people are really engaged in the content, and for advertisers, listen up. This is a medium where people are actually paying attention. Doing housework or chores, driving, relaxing before going to sleep, cooking or baking, walking outside, running or exercising, or riding public transportation. We'll put links to this. The slideshow from Edison Research, links to the Florida research in the show notes. Everybody can find it. But very interesting findings.
Their research is always really extraordinary.
Yeah, it is.
They do an incredible job. So I'm really surprised that people. Where do you listen?
I listen everywhere. I listen at home. I listen in the car. I listen whenever I walk. I don't listen while I work out because I'm at a gym with a bunch of other people. If I was doing, I am in a fitness program. If I was doing just working out individually, I would listen. But yeah, I have an instructor who's yelling at me, so I have to listen to them. Plus, they play loud music while I'm doing it. So
I listen at home. I listen while I'm working. I listen in the gym. I do not listen while I'm walking around in Manhattan because I think it's dangerous. But most people are, in their phones. And I have a friend who says that we're going to end up with one eye in the middle of our heads. We're going to be walking on all fours, and we're going to be having a phone right in the middle of all of that.
yeah,
and I think that's true.
The next thing is the actual smart glasses where they actually work and they don't make you look like a fool like Google Glass did.
Yeah, but people are going to fall down a lot of holes, when they're walking around with their data right in front of their face. That's the way it is. Anyway, that brings us to the end of Beyond Social Media Show, episode 265. And we want to thank you for watching and listening. You can find us by searching Beyond Social Media Show. You'll find all our channels and all our content. You can find links to everything we've discussed here today at beyondsocialmediashow.com/265. We would love you to leave us a review on iTunes and let us know what you think about the show on our site. I am here with David Erickson, who is D. Erickson on Twitter, D.E. Erickson on Instagram, and he blogs at the wonderful E-Strategy blog, which you should definitely have on your list of reading materials. And I am B.L. Ochman. I am What's Next on Twitter. My blog is what'snextblog.com. My YouTube channel is What's Next Blog. On Google Plus, I was plus BL Ochman. We'll see what I'm going to be on Currents. And you will find the show, of course, at beyondsocialmediashow.com, on YouTube, on Twitter, we're BS Media Show. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Home. And we will be back next week, same time, same bat channel. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.